Is that a little loud, Shelley? It's hard for me to tell. Well, good morning. Craig called me last week and asked me to substitute in here today, and I thought I was substituting for Craig, so I guess I'm substituting for Craig, who's substituting for Bob. So I'm your second or third tier substitute, so you get what you pay for. Not really knowing what y'all are covering or what y'all are doing, Craig gave me an outline, and it appears that y'all are in Acts chapter 9. Have y'all done the stoning of Stephen and the scattering of the church? Or is that just something he gave me? Oh, so y'all are already into the story a little bit. Okay. Oh, okay. That's not what he told me. All right. Well, I'm going to probably rehash a couple of things then. Sorry, because I started out at the very beginning of chapter 9. In context, y'all been working through this. We're gonna go back in and refer back to some stuff that you've already covered again as I get a little bit further into it. I'm gonna just read the first six verses of chapter 9 real quick to set up where I want to go today. Chapter 9, verse 1. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. Some commentators say that the NIV did a poor job rendering that murderous threats, but a better reading was threats and murder. So even maybe a little more violent sounding than what it's saying right here. Although plenty of backup for the violence in other books and other letters he's written down the road. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogue in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." Reason I wanted to reread that, and I'm sure that Bob and Craig or whoever's been teaching has done this, but I want to establish a kind of a visual in your mind, because to me this refers back to chapter 7 a little bit. What is Paul now seeing, or what do we know that he saw after it's all said and done? What is this visual? This is the risen Lord. He saw Jesus. He saw him. He was able to see the Lord. What had happened back in chapter 7 with Stephen? What did he see? He saw heaven open, and he saw angels, and he saw the Lord sitting at the right hand of God. What happened to Stephen as a result of that statement that he saw that? He was stoned to death and killed. And I want to talk about that for a minute. And maybe y'all covered that some, but I wanted to just get your ideas and just get your thoughts on this for a minute. Stephen was recounting the history of Israel in front of the Sanhedrin. And as he did so, he was tying together their history with the Messiah. And there's a disconnect there, isn't there? They had an idea of who the Messiah would be. Stephen had a different idea of who the Messiah really was. Because why? Why did Stephen have a different outlook on who the Messiah was than the Sanhedrin? He'd seen him. Okay, he'd been there. He'd heard what Jesus said. He had seen the miracles that he did. He had seen all that on earth, and after Jesus' death and resurrection, Stephen gets to see him again. My question, and it has to do with what happens to Saul and what Saul is actually doing. Now, we're still calling him Saul at this point, of course. What is Saul's job right now? Persecuting Christians. Okay. I want to tie that together a little bit, because what I'm trying to get to help clarify, and this is for me, guys, as much as anything, why are the Jews persecuting Christians? Why are the Jews so adamant to the point of killing people? Okay. Willard said one of the main reasons is to tear down the hierarchy of their church. Okay. Okay. They're trying to destroy the law. They're talking against the law. What did they stone Stephen for? Blasphemy. What is blasphemy? That's kind of one of the things I want to talk about for just a second. That's what Saul is going out dragging people out of their homes and out of their synagogues for blasphemy. What Old Testament law specifically now, not in generalizations, is there a specific Old Testament law that Stephen violated in saying what he said that caused them to stone him? Okay, but Stephen is not denying that God is God. He's not denying that Yahweh is sovereign. He's not denying that God is one. What did the Jews get so mad about that they thought they had the right to stone him? When could the Jews execute the death penalty on each other under the law? Okay, but what specific kinds of laws did you violate and then were stoned for? Okay. Well, interesting when you say blasphemy, that's what I always thought too. We have record of someone being stoned for blasphemy back in Leviticus, but God, in his directions, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that Stephen, what he said in front of the Sanhedrin that day, back in chapter 7, does not amount to anything that I found in the Old Testament that would allow them to stone him. Jesus had gone around. What were they always trying to do with Jesus? Trying to kill him. What was he saying that was blasphemous? What was he saying that was in violation of the law that they wanted to kill him for? But is that if according to them, and that's that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. These people, and Saul is right up there among them, had in their minds decided that the Messiah was going to be a certain kind of guy. The Messiah was going to be a king. We know this, right? We've talked about it. They were looking for an earthly king. They were looking for someone of princely bearing. They were looking for someone who was going to take them out of Roman occupation and reestablish them as the... Yeah, and they were looking for their bread and butter. They were looking for their way of life. And what I'm getting at is that the justification for Stephen's death by stoning just wasn't there. He didn't violate anything in the old law. He didn't violate a covenant. He didn't violate a law by saying what he said. But the Jews, in killing him, in my mind, violated the law. They murdered him. They murdered him without cause. That was murder was something that was punishable by death under the old law. That's the first thing that made him mad, wasn't it? Stephen, he accused him, rightly so. Right. He has listed their sins, and so what they have decided to do is kill him, not because they had any legal justification to do it. They just wanted him gone. Okay, and Saul, you got to understand. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Saul is right there with him. Okay. Saul is moving out in tremendous zeal, but he is unjustified in his zeal. Okay, so just because he was zealous, just because he thought he was doing what God wanted him to do, didn't make him right. So he's as we have seen, and we read in other chapters, he's a very violent man. He has decided that anybody who is proclaiming the way needs to be answered for it, and in his mind needs to be put to death. He was standing there. We know in that famous verse is that he was standing there when Stephen was stoned, and he was taking the coats, and he was assenting to the death and the killing of Stephen. I want to go back. I want to read Acts chapter 9, verse 16, real quick. Again, regarding the same. This is regarding the same event, but I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. But the Lord said to Ananias, "Go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name." So I want to talk about that verse. I want to talk about two different things in that verse. Saul, who has been working as hard as he can to stop the spread of this gospel, is now being told, or Ananias is being told, that this is the guy that's going to go out and he's going to, not only is he not going to stop this, he's the vessel by which this is going to explode, okay? He is the one that Jesus is going to show himself to, and that as a result of that, he's going to change his understanding of who Messiah was, okay? And then in verse 16 he says, "I will show him how much he must suffer for my name." And I want to talk about that a little bit as well in just a second. But Saul, if you will, do you think as soon as he meets the Lord and he goes into the town, and I think y'all have already covered the fact that Ananias came and baptized him, he received his sight back. Think about what he was in 2-3 days before, what his goal was, and now what he's about to start doing. Do you think Saul suddenly knows things are going to be different for him? Right, and we read that in some of his subsequent letters. Yeah, I made a little list here. What changed for Saul? And you know, there's so many things. You know, we find out in some of his letters that he says that he was advancing in Judaism beyond many Jews of his own age. So he's got a great job, if you will. Okay, his livelihood now, because he received letters from high priests to go to Damascus. Probably somebody's funding that trip. I don't know that's coming out of his own pocket. I'm imagining that's being funded. So he has a very powerful political position until this day, until this 3-day event, these 3 days right here. He had been very powerful politically. As a very powerful political, upstanding young Jewish man, he probably has a wife. Don't know about kids. I'm not even going to conjecture that, but I think we can substantiate that he probably had a wife based on what he said in 1 Corinthians. He had influential friends in high places, if you will, and he was the guy that was right. Okay, he had it all together. He was the guy that was right, and you move from that kind of personality and that kind of position within 3 days, all things changed. He no longer has a powerful political position. He may not even have a means to make a living anymore. He may be being out of the job that he was instructed to do or doing. He may not have any way of making money anymore. Now, we realize that he was a tent maker, but I doubt he was a tent maker at this point in time. He was probably being involved in the political structure of under the Sanhedrin. I doubt he was making tents at this point. But his means of livelihood is gone. His friends are all gone. None of the friends that he had before. And as I mentioned a while ago, probably not even his wife. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he mentions the fact that, you know, some of the other apostles, they took a believing life along with him. If Saul's wife didn't convert to Christianity, he's left without a wife. And it's conjecture, but by saying what he said and knowing the kind of life he lived, we pretty good bet that he no longer had a wife. You think he's afraid for his life? He's been out killing Christians. So, and that was under the approval of the Sanhedrin. Well, now that he is doing quite the opposite, He's in danger from them, but who else is he in danger from? Or who else is he worried about? Right, he was in danger with his old life, but now who else is he worried about? Right, he's been persecuting and hauling Christians off and putting them in prison. So now who does he go to who are his friends? Who is his place of comfort? And I think there's a reason that he finds himself in this kind of position where he is totally and completely devoid of anything, okay? Why do we find ourselves in that position sometimes? And if we do, what's God's purpose in that? You think? Okay, Lanny, he's going to make us dependent on him. If we have a powerful political position, if we have wealth, if we have a wife, if we have a family and friends and all the material blessings that we need, what can that lead to? What did it lead to in Paul's case? Tremendous amount of pride, tremendous amount of him having his own opinion and his own direction and his own decision, doing things the way he wanted to do, doing things that he thought was right. He forgot who was in charge. God has a tendency, when we forget who's in charge, to bring us down, doesn't he? To strip us down to our basic elements, and at that point in time, strip us down to the point where who else is there left to rely on? God. He wants us to recognize him as creator and as supplier of everything that we need, and he did that for Saul. He took everything Saul had away from him. He stripped him down to absolutely nothing. Is that fair? Is that fair for God to do that? Okay. He opened his eyes. Ed? Yeah, that we humans have a really messed up idea of what is fair, don't we? Saul can have a tremendous amount of empathy now for just about everybody, because he's been everywhere. What does he say about himself later on in some of his writings? Okay, he was content. What else did he do to reach people? He did, right? He didn't ask for anybody. What I'm trying to, based on his ability to have been on both sides of this situation, he could empathize with other people. He said that in verses, I think it's in Corinthians, he said that he became all things to all people so that he might win them. I mean, he kind of knew how everybody feels. He knows how it feels to be politically powerful and comfortable, and he knows how it feels to have absolutely nothing. And as Willard said, he's learned how to be content in those situations. But as soon as Christ was revealed to him, the other thing I wanted to ask is, did he have a choice in what he did from there? We know what he did from there. We know the path that he took, and it seemed like he was, in my mind, does it feel like he kind of got steamrolled a little bit? Is that the feeling you get? But ultimately, did Paul or Saul have a choice with what he decided to do after Christ revealed himself to him? Right. Okay. You know, Christ said he's going to suffer, okay? Christ told him through Ananias that he was going to suffer for his name. Knowing that, did he have a choice? Could he have said, no thanks, I'm not going to go out there and proclaim this name? Could Paul have had that choice? Yeah, he sure could. We all have that choice when Christ is finally revealed to us, when we're at the bottom or wherever it is that we are. we are then faced with a choice of how we're going to go ahead and proceed. And I want to talk a little bit about the suffering side of this. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. Willard was saying that Paul's conversion really probably didn't start just right here. It probably started with things he had seen, the stoning of Stephen. As a member of the Sanhedrin, he probably was witness to a lot of the things that the apostles were brought before the Sanhedrin along the way. He may have seen them and making their speeches when they were brought up to answer for the things they had been preaching. He'd probably seen Jesus. I'm guessing had seen, or at the very least, he knew very well who Jesus was as he traveled on the earth and preached. So the process had been going on for some time. Okay. His awareness of Jesus had been there. That today was not the first time he met Jesus or he knew anything about Jesus. He obviously knew who he was because he was dragging converts out of their homes and witnessing how they reacted to the persecution that they were receiving. So Saul's been seeing this. Something's been going on in his mind all this time, and this event on the road to Damascus is what just solidifies and being able to hear directly from Christ changed the direction and the whole countenance of his life. Let's look at Acts 26:14, if you will. This is Paul's recounting this later on. Verse 14, and this kind of bears out what we've been saying. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. We don't find that in the Acts chapter 9 account, but he's kicking against the goads. You know, around here we know what goads are. Goads are something you've been sticking your farm animals with to keep them moving, or your kids or whatever to keep them moving in the right direction. And you know that's been going on for some time. The picture here is he's kicking against the goads. That Jesus has said in saying this, he's saying, you know, I've been there. You've been seeing me all along the way, yet you've been reacting violently against it. You've been kicking back at it, and now he can no longer kick. He's reached a point where he has to make a decision, and we know, thankfully, what that decision was. We have what, 25% of our New Testament. I've heard the 25% of our New Testament was written by this man that was kicking against the goad, this man that was violent, this man that was antagonistic toward the way, that was persecuting and killing Christians, and has made about as big a turnaround as you can possibly make. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 9 and 10. These are just some more thoughts that I have had from reading through this. 1 Corinthians 15, 9 and 10. Let's go there. What else does Paul learn? Paul's letters provide us with just tremendous amounts of insight in quotes and in sayings that we, all the little sayings, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Lots and lots of these little sayings come from Paul's writings. But in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 9 and 10, Paul's writing about what kind of person he was. For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Saul at this time, he knew what was fixing to happen to him. He knew that his life was going to be changed forever by this event and the recognition of who Christ was. And he was not proud of what he had done, okay? He was not proud of persecuting Christians, but he recognized that anybody can be forgiven, even someone like him. And that's something for us, that's a definite lesson for us. I mean, there is the person that you hear the most foul language coming out of their mouths, you see the most violence, the most visceral reactions when things happen, those folks, the gospel is for them too. Our tendency is to say, well, he's that kind of person. He's not going to have any tendency to listen to this gospel. He's not going to have any desire to learn about God or change his ways or change his life. And we don't have the right to make that decision. That's that person's decision. Our job is to present that gospel, to present that knowledge of Christ to them so that they can then make the decision. It's not our decision to make. And Saul, he has to know that, because he has to know within just this short period of time how far he's come and how much change has had to occur in his way of thinking. So anybody that's, no matter what they've been like, can be forgiven and can become useful and very powerful in the kingdom. Do you know anyone that you've ever met or that you've known that was one way when they were younger, and after becoming a Christian, they're just totally different? You know anybody like that? Raise your hand if you've met someone that was a vile offender, if you will, that was violent, that was just a terrible person, and then after meeting Christ is now somebody completely different. Yeah, we know people like that. The gospel is incredibly powerful. Gospel is more powerful than our imagination and our judgments. Believe me. Okay, now here's. I want to spend the next few minutes talking about a couple of things that just came to me as I read through this. This is a difficult. I'm going to ask a question, and it's a very, very difficult question, and it's one I've thought about a lot lately, and it has a lot to do with us as Christians today, and just thinking about the kind of life that Paul led after he was converted. My question, and I've thought about this even before I was asked to do this study. If we knew, okay, we're parents. As parents, if we knew that our kids would suffer or even die as Christians or for being Christians, would we still want them to know Christ and to be Christians? Okay, and I ask that because of what Jesus said when he said, Paul, I'm going to show him how much he's going to have to suffer for me. So is Paul the only one that Christ called to suffer? Exactly. You know, we have an issue in America today in our Christianity. We, in our minds, whether we like it or not, and each of us needs to admit this to some extent, we all believe that if we live a Christian life, we're going to be taken care of, that God's going to take care of us. And he does. He promises that, and he absolutely does that. But our idea of what we think of being taken care of is maybe a little skewed, okay? Honestly, we all believe that if we, and I'm just as guilty, I'm not blaming anybody here, I'm saying I'm as guilty as anybody else, that because I follow Christ, that what's fair is for me to get good health, to have a good job, to have a believing wife or a wife that is my partner, to have a good, all these things that we believe deep down inside, whether we really admit it or not, we all believe we deserve these things, okay? Well, Paul had those things, and what did Paul say about those things later on? He considered them what? Garbage. He considered all that garbage. So what we in America strive for so wholeheartedly today is probably garbage, okay? That sounds awful to say, but if we are directing our energies and our lives toward achieving those kind of comforts if we're comfortable in our Christianity, if we're comfortable sitting in this pew today, if everything about our relationship with Christ is comfortable, then I think we've got a problem. I think that we're not realizing what all there is for us out there. And I'm not saying that we need to go out and just purposely just make ourselves uncomfortable. What I'm saying is if we're putting ourselves out there in the situations that God wants us to, there's going to be discomfort. We're going to suffer in some way, the way Paul did in his life. But go back to my question. If you knew your kid, if you had the ability to know as a parent that when my kid is 28 years old, if I train them in the way of Christ and introduce them to Christ, they're going to be killed in an act of persecution or something. Roxy, would you, do you want to continue with that Christian training? Regardless of when that is. Right. Right. Still a hard thing as a parent, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And if we were more conscious of past now, if we were more conscious of down the road, then the answer to that question, I think, is as difficult as it may sound on the surface. The answer to that question is absolutely. We absolutely would raise our kids as Christians. We absolutely would want our kids to know Jesus and to know the power of his resurrection so that they have the power of being resurrected as well when they die. The reason I ask that question is because we have a tendency to not understand and not really think about how serious this is. Not think about how serious a question that is, how serious a responsibility it is as parents. And I don't mean just parents. I mean, every one of us has young people or others that we're going to have an influence on in our lives. And the only way that we have a hope of seeing them again in eternity is, regardless of what kind of suffering they're going to endure, we have got to give them that good news. We have got to train our children in the way they should go. I'll go back. Let's go back and read a couple of passages in 2 Corinthians. Just going back and talking about this comfort. Chapter 11, verses 20, about 23. This is Paul. Whoops, I'm sorry. I jumped to the wrong verse. Sorry, guys. This is Paul talking about suffering. This is Paul talking about what all he endured. Did Christ promise him that he would suffer? Yes. And here's just a little taste of what Paul has gone through. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and have been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger from the city, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. Paul's life became as great an example for us as any other than Jesus that I can think of. And through all these persecutions, through all these trials, through all these things that don't seem to make sense, we find a man who gives us quotes like, "I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I'm in." Paul, he got it. He was able to see through the now, as Willard says, and see what was to come. And that's what our job is as parents. That's what our job is as teachers. That's what our job is as people who are called to make disciples. We have to live out lives that as people look at our life, the way we look at Paul's, they can see that we understand that it's worth it. Regardless of what we endure, regardless of what we suffer, regardless of what we go through while we're here, it's worth it. It is worth it because of the promises that we have of eternal life with God. Yeah. Well, at his conversion, that's exactly what Christ told him, is that he was going to be his ambassador and he was going to go take the good news to the Gentiles and to their kings. And he did that. He didn't shy away from that responsibility, knowing the suffering that he would endure along the way and the fact that he would finally be killed and die as a result of this name. And what's ironic about that is that he ends up dying as a persecuted Christian, but he started out, living as a Jew who was persecuting Christians. I mean, his life was a tremendous example of the change that can occur when we know Christ, when we fully commit ourselves to Christ. And I guess the question I ask about the kind of suffering that we would potentially see our children have is, again, to say that this is a serious business. This is not just coming to church on Sunday mornings and being comfortable in a pew. It is not just hearing a great message and then walking away and not doing anything about that, and not putting that message into practice. This is a very serious business that we're involved in, guys. And nobody understood that better than Saul. And nobody would tell you before Saul would that it's worth it, that it is the way we should go, that it is our duty and it is our opportunity. Exactly, and they couldn't stop it, and they were unable to stop it, even killing people, even taking away their property. None of that stopped the early Christians from continuing in their relationship with God. Yes. Right. Yeah, that word about that change got out pretty quickly. Yeah. Right. It started immediately, and he's only been a Christian for a few days, and he's already willing to and understanding the role of persecution in his life. So. Right. And it became a lifelong chase. It became a lifelong events in Paul's life as he was constantly persecuted. So Christ didn't lie to him when he told him that he was going to suffer for his name. He did. He suffered physically and emotionally and in all manner. He suffered on this earth for the name of Christ. And at the end, we know, at the very end, he said it was all worth it. That all this other stuff that he had was rubbish, and that the name of Christ was all that he needed to sustain him, both in this life and in the life to come. So I guess what I want y'all to think about this week is think about Paul and the amount of suffering that he endured because he was willing to give up his own pursuits and give up his own desires and his own ambitions and transfer all that over and have all those ambitions and all those feelings for Christ. And that's just a lesson for us as we get out this week. Just think about that. Just think about anybody that you see. There's so many lessons that can come out of here. forgiveness, forgiving people for what they've done. We could just stand here and name item after item after item that we draw from this. So if you'll bow with me, we'll close with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this opportunity to be together this morning. Father, thank you so much for allowing us to be here in a place where we can encourage each other and build each other up and lift each other up. And Father, as we hear songs of praise to you, the tremendous encouragement we get from that and the encouragement we get from hearing your word preached. And Father, we just look so forward to having a time to have a meal together as our supper, that we can remember Jesus and think about his life and about his example. And Father, this morning we ask that you help us to use Paul as our example in our everyday living, that we give it all up and understand that suffering is going to come when we really commit to pouring our life into spreading the good news. So, Father, as we do that, as we commit to that, be with us. Father, help your Spirit to keep us strong, to give us the words to say to folks, to show them the way, and introduce them to your incredibly glorious and powerful Son. In his holy name we pray. Amen. Thank y'all.
Giver of every perfect thing, to you be the glory. Maker of heaven and of earth, no one can comprehend your worth. King over all the universe, to you be the glory. And I'm alive because I'm alive in you. And it's all because of Jesus. I'm alive because of Jesus. It's all because the blood of Jesus Christ, because of Jesus, that covers me and raised this dead man's life. It's all because of Jesus I'm alive. Giver of every breath I breathe, author of all eternity, giver of every perfect thing, to you be the glory. Maker of heaven and of earth, no one can comprehend your worth. King over all the universe, to you be the glory. And I'm alive because I'm alive in